Abe here, and I wanted to let you know that if you're able, you can upgrade your small beans skill over at patreon.com/smallbeans. Here's why you should do that. If you pledge 5 measly beans a month, you get access to about half our podcasts that you don't get if you're just listening to the free feed. Shows include Star Trek: The Next Futurama, Spiel Boys, Like Razor Blade Pie, and bonus episodes of I'll Show You Mine If You Show Me Yours. Not to mention bonus content including info and updates on the movie we're making, Papa Bear. Hey, where's all the reasons to not subscribe to Patreon? I can't find them. Anyway, back to the show.
A simple bat, it munched a pup. Now he's sleepy and his head is smeared with blood and cum. So tell me when you're gonna let him in. This car's become a doggy bag filled with your children. And if you fucked your neighbor, you deserve it. Tad, don't joke, you chode, you know that could just curb it. You're the toy in this kid's meal, you Kermit. Hun, why don't you go feed your son to Cujo? To feed your son to Cujo.
Yes.
Yeah. Kings of Kings.
That was delightful.
It was pitchy dog. But we got it out. I just wanted it to be close enough that people go, I know what song that's supposed to be. That's the goal.
The big hope. You know, I thought it was beautiful. I think Cujo it is he's just trying to find a little treat, you know? That's all he's doing in his brain. He's just trying to have a little good time.
Yeah, dude. Well, I'll drop so Abe Epperson there, Michael Swaim here, Kings of King all around you, Cox around. And we're here to talk about Cujo today. We talk about anything adapted from the works of Stephen King. And usually I would save this for a later portion, but I think it makes sense based on what Abe just said. And it's like encapsulated itself. Man, I read the book as a kid. I barely remember it, but I do remember that at least from the beginning, like the getting the rabies part is from the dog's point of view. And all I can say is, if you are the kind who inhabits the animal's point of view, it's much sadder. If it's just Jaws, if the dog is not a human equation part to you, like you don't care that he has rabies, he's just Jaws. It's pretty much like, will they survive or won't they? Don't breathe, like with even less of a twist, just a hook of a premise. If you think about the dog's point of view at all, or if you own a dog, it's way sadder to me. You're like, oh, and the dog, like he doesn't want to be doing this.
He's wants scared his little and terrified, and his brain is God. That's
because then you get the layer of what is it like to lose your mind, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Which is spooky.
I mean, I immediately thought when I was watching it, I like stopped, I paused the movie, and in my head, I was just thinking about like, to have rabies, like to me, like
to have rabies,
to suddenly just be like, I want to do this, and everything inside me is saying, do this one thing.
It's pretty close to zombie mode. Yeah.
It's like, I want to hear the narrations of the dog where he's just like, and then I was going to do that. Just voice over Cujo that's all I'm really saying.
Sure. I want Brad Neely to do an audiobook read along of Cujo's thoughts.
These impossible fuckers.
These fuckers locked in their kitty car. I foamed once more.
The wine
Most
talks.
people will not know what we're referencing. If you are a comedy and a Harry Potter fan, or hate Harry Potter and love comedy,
fine. Yeah.
Check out Wizard People, dear readers. We digress. Let's get into format. How do we do that, Abe?
This is our first segment where we basically give a synopsis of the movie. It's called Under the Dome.
Our best guess puts the dome at 20,000 10,000 feet, sir.
Did he just call it a dome?
You think we might be stuck in here a while?
Speaking of losing your mind, factoid that I think should color the entire episode. Stephen King has multiple times said, although he didn't say it around the press at the time, he said it years later. So maybe it's a story that his own mind concocted. We all of us tell our tales. But his current going story is that he was so deep in his alcoholism while he wrote Cujo that it's the one book that he doesn't remember writing a whit of it. It was all during blackouts. He's just like, he's just
like, yeah. Yeah, fucking that.
Oh, I wrote that. Cool. Yeah. I read a lot, dude.
In fact, since you mentioned it, the original novel, which I have read neither of these novels, but it's apparently for the King Heads, a sequel of sorts for the Dead Zone. If you remember Dead Zone, the main character, Frank Dodd, spoilers, was killed. And he becomes kind of a boogeyman in Castle Rock. And it's the foundation, one of the first itemized kind of canons that we actually see in the Stephen verse.
Yes.
Because
and more
apparently,
less than a sequel, I'd say it's more of him building his shared universe canon thing. Yeah.
Right. So more on that later if we care to speak about it.
Sure.
But
I could do I'll at least launch the synopsis because it's, man, you don't get more straightforward. It is novel length, but it's intentionally simple and powerful and trying to be like Jaws, if Jaws was a dog, right? But even a weak person can usually survive a dog, most dog situations. Not always, but you got to stack the deck a little in the dog's favor. So this movie starts with the dog, Cujo, played by a St. Bernard in the film version. Multiple St. Bernards, of course, but I mean, that's the breed that you should imagine in your mind's eye. And in fact, from its POV, as it wanders around a field, it chases a rabbit into a little cave where it gets its snoot bit by a bat, and you infer that it gets rabies. Well, it says, the dog turns to camera and says, to have rabies.
rabies.
He says, Jordy, what is it like to lose your mind? And you go, dude, there's no Jordy here. That dog's crazy.
That dog's fucking lost his mind.
So there's just the boiling pot, like you're aware this dog has rabies, and then way more than I remember or thought. You don't worry about that for a while. So we set up all this human drama before the dog actually snaps, although you see it getting sicker and sicker.
I think it's like 45 minutes before Cujo actually goes full on Cujo.
Of a straight 90-minute movie, we meet Tad. Daniel, I think is his real name. He's a little kid. He's scared of the dark and monsters in his closet. A common King trope. He flicks off the lights and runs under the covers. He calls his parents. They have to say special magic words to banish the monsters. He's scared of monsters. It's that simple of an offer, but it works, right? Because you already know he's going to have to face a real life monster.
And you get the feeling... Yeah. And you get the feeling that it's a happy family, one that covers its, all categories of Americana check is all I'm saying.
Like many sitcom dads in this era, this is not a sitcom, but still, dad writes jingles for commercials and shit like that. I'm thinking City Slickers, etc. Yeah,
exactly.
It was a popular thing at the time, like baking for a female protag was at certain times. Anyway, dad writes... he designs full designs. Now, I shouldn't belittle. He does a whole campaign with like the professor who tastes cereal and tests it and says it's good, right? And it's like the Ronald McDonald, and it's doing very well. And it's what the family relies on is his work with this ad campaign. He seems like a decent dad. Mom and dad seem like they get along fairly well. But then you start to pick up on little tension, and you notice that there's this very swarthy, bearded neighbor who comes around a lot named Roger. And that he and the wife sort of have lingering glances.
Steve is his name.
Oh, Steve. I don't know why. I guess I'm thinking of your dad, the famous Lothario Roger.
It's based on my dad. Who is played by Christopher Stone, which will become important later. Know. Yeah. Okay.
And then you see that he plays tennis with him, and he works as a carpenter and does odd jobs for them and shit, and works on his projects, and is clearly fucking his wife is where I'm going with that.
Yeah.
And then we cut to confirm him blasting a note on the trombone to symbolize, hey, I just fucked your wife wherever you are, dude.
It's great.
Fucked her.
I do love, there's this one little bit that, like, the first scene before we even understand that they're fucking and there's an affair, that there's a previous shot where Dee Wallace, who is Donna, the wife of
The wife
Vic,
and mother.
the wife and mother, is like overcompensating and very cold to the Christopher Stone character. Like, she's doing this in order to be obvious to keep Vic, like not wise to the scent.
Like, I don't like your friend Steve.
Like, he sucks. He's
I think
shitty.
you do protest too much. Yeah.
Yeah. But in fact, he is indeed a Roger, as you said.
He Rogers her. The local mailman tells Dad where he can get a deal on some car work. And that's how he ends up at Joe Camber's farm, where he and Donna go. Donna runs into Lady Camber out back, and we see that she's a little shy, but not really weird. She's polite enough, and she sees the dog. It looks menacing at first, but they assure them it likes kids, and he pets the dog. Everything seems fine, and it's like reverse horror where you're like, oh, everything's fine.
I love there's this moment with Vic where he goes, like, he's contemplating if it's like, is it fine, like staring at Cujo, is it fine if I leave my family with this dog?
With a large dog.
And then he goes, it's all right. Yeah, it's all right. He literally says that line. It feels like an Arrested Development moment or something.
Tracking the rabies, we just see that Donna notices that Cujo has a little bite on his nose that's like putrefying, but he's not acting weird yet. In bed that night, Dad seems suspicious. Mom assures him our marriage is super good. You have nothing to worry about at all.
I'm not fucking guys, for sure.
Can me that trombone, please, honey. Before I go to bed, I have to blast it. You hear another one in the distance. What does that mean? Nothing. He wakes up to find that the cereal he created, the professor character for, that whole family of cereals is being recalled because of an internal hemorrhaging scare, like the Simpsons episode with the jagged metal Crestio. But it's not true. Their formula had way too much red food coloring in all of their cereals, so kids are shitting red. And parents are not buying it, and they're canceling the professor because of this. It's like an odd chain of events, but whatever.
It's surprisingly complex for what it is.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know why it needs to be.
It's like
this
a drunk
specific.
guy over specifying a story. No, dude. This guy works.
Don't understand.
He made the professor. Let me tell you about the professor test cereal, dude.
Like, he wasn't shitting blood. It was just red dye. Okay.
Yeah. Calm down. And then wife goes to Steve, who's like, are we boning or what? And she's like, no, I came to tell you it's over. We find out Steve's not cool, right? He's pretty physical and aggressive about pleading with her. Dad spots them angrily arguing out in the street, and Steve is like grabbing her and has his shirt off. So he can put two and two together. And he doesn't say anything, but you get a few scenes where he just understands that his wife is fucking Steve. Mom picks Tad up at school. He has a head wound from a swing hit, and they establish this thing that he says although it never pays off, so I don't know why I bother bringing it up. Overdone with gone. Didn't you think he'd say that to Cujo at some point? He never does. Anyway.
Never. There's no puns in this movie, which would made it much better.
There were rhyming scenes in that way. Yeah, which is more of a modern thing, but anyway. He gets home. I thought Dad would confront her immediately, but he's just kind of like cold and standoffish. He sends the kid inside, so I thought so they could talk, but they don't. They're just like cold. Then Joe Camber, the guy who's going to work on his car, Pinto, gets home in his truck and goes like, Cujo, you all right, dude? And it looks all bloody and gross and has mayonnaise smeared on its face, and it hides under the porch.
Oh,
it's
such a good boy.
Like, upset now. Yeah. I'm tired. You go.
Yeah. And I love that the Camber's household is slightly, like, I wanted to, just for later, I wanted to separate the idyllic comparisons of two different, like, kind of classes of America, like what we see in this movie. And one of the things that they do with the Camber's household is that they're clearly on the poor side. She won the lottery. The wife buys something for the husband, and he's immediately like, we can't afford this, and it's cold. It's a very cold
mean
house.
You almost get the impression he might hit her, but he
right.
doesn't. Right.
And then she immediately asks to take look, here's what I want. I want to take the kid and I want to stay with my sister for a week out of town. And Joe immediately, it cuts to him talking with his bud about he's going to sleep with women and drink that whole week.
And buy baseball tickets.
And buy baseball tickets because America, baby.
Yeah.
And so it's just very interesting to me that we see the kind of infidelities of both like two families going on. But like, I don't know, like I want to hash it out with you later.
Yeah,
but,
I have no idea if the book does this.
I don't know.
But this has story, it's unexplored in this film, has the makings of like a Parasite where, you know what I mean? Where where the lower class people are also driven rabid by desperation. And it's all a metaphor for capitalist oppression. Like all those makings are here and would have made it so cool.
So cool.
Yeah.
Anyway,
but that movie doesn't really do that.
In another infidelity, Steve returns and he and Donna have kind of a struggle as he tries to kiss her. And Vic walks in on the aftermath. And at this point, Vic is like clearly suspicious, even though Donna denies it. His change in behavior basically signals to Donna that he knows. So she basically, over some few scenes, she comes clean.
Just admits it. Yeah.
It's over. It's just over. Okay, so let's just move on. And he's clearly not over it. He has barely had any time to internalize it. And and at the same time, because of the work, kids shitting blood thing, he takes a 10-day work trip. So he's gonna bounce. So now in
order to think up new ideas for how to sell cereal, you have to travel around with your business partner. You know, Abe, how when we write when we break stories, we travel all around the country.
Let's just fucking jockey it out on some late nights where we drink coffee and chat about the problem.
You know who's not there? Our fucking kids and wives.
Our kids and wives aren't there for sure.
Yeah.
It's very funny. So we see this kind of comedy of errors forming where it's just like everybody is leaving except the principal players who are like Cujo'd.
And of course, if you know the premise, you're like, all right, how are they going to maneuver this kid? This kid's going to be maneuvered to this dog, and all the protective layers will be coincidentally stripped away, right? Unprotected kid with rabid dog.
It does have that vibe. Like this the movie is kind of like the orchestra tuning up for the first 45 minutes.
It's a little Final Destination with rabies. Yeah,
exactly. So back at the Cambers property, Cujo basically at this point has turned rabid and starts growling at the Cambers boy. I forget his name. Brett, maybe?
Joe's kid, Brett. Yeah.
Yeah. It takes 45 minutes, I think I mentioned, for Cujo to like attack anyone in this movie.
He does not attack this kid.
No, he just kind of, we're showing the slow roll of like, it takes about 4 days for him to really get fucked up. And by that point he gets really fucked up. So we get more scenes with basically 45 minutes in the movie. He does attack Joe's alcoholic neighbor, the guy he was talking about baseball with, and Cujo just rips his throat out. There's a few shots that they kind of grapple. That must have just been so fun to shoot on set.
Yeah.
Just roughhousing with the dog. It's clear he probably has just like peanut butter on his neck or something. So yeah, he's done. And we kind of ellipse time a little bit, and Joe finds his neighbor's dead body like a bit later, like maybe later that day. And surprise, double attack. Cujo's still there, takes his next victim, which is the Joe Cambers, the mechanic. Yeah, and this time it's done in an ellipse cut, literally, where they cut right out of Cujo jumps at him from the darkness, which this film does several times. Then back at the Cambers house, Donna and Tad have kind of arrived, and they mentioned there's a new car issue. It's like a very greasy and bloody Cujo tries to basically attack them through the window. And this
when you know it, the problem that they brought the car over to fix gives up the ghost just as they pull to a stop in front of Joe's house. So that we have our premise now. Mother and small child in shitty car that won't move, a rabid dog.
A yellow Ford Pinto. Yeah, and Donna kind of acts quickly, shuts the windows, closes the door, but now they're locked in the car and it just won't start. I thought the attack was pretty well done. like with the crying of the kid, the honking of the horn, D. Wallace like is screaming, and this just very angry dog from all shots.
So
it's
angry.
It's very terrifying.
Someone get this? Whose dog is this?
So Donna and Tad like stay the night in the car, and the Camber's phone, we hear ringing and ringing and ringing. So we know that people outside are looking for them, but eventually it's got to be like, it's now a movie that's about the next 48 hours.
Right.
You know?
Of course. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So there's a bit about like, oh, we'll just wait for the postman. And I love that they cut to an almostly like overly efficient scene where immediately after that it shows like cut to the post office. And then it's
and
just
the guy's like, I got to deliver a thing out to the old Camber place. And he goes, I'm going over there. I'll take it for you. But I'm going 8 hours from now. Like, I'm not going now. That's fine.
Like,
that's great, dude. End of
and
scene.
also you don't have to do this until further notice.
You can just do it tomorrow.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe I won't.
So after some time, D. Wallace tries to get out of the car to find like a weapon. She sees bat.
Baseball bat.
Yeah. And I love that the dog is sneaky in this scene where he's like hiding behind the car. He knew to hide from her.
Multiple times. This rabid dog sneaks up ninja style on people where it's inches away from them, behind them, and they go, oh shit, Cujo's there. It's a dog that's out of its mind. How is that possible?
It's losing its mind and it's doing like pincer moves.
Go,
it's fucking
slow.
awesome.
Got you. Yeah.
Got you. I'm fucking Cujo, bitch. Cujo attacks her basically.
Rips her up a bit. Yeah.
Rips her up a bit, bites her leg pretty viciously. But she fends it off with the thermos, which I thought is pretty good. Like if I had like what's in my car.
A thermos that I believe is full of Tad's pee.
Yes.
Because he had to pee. So in a way, she's claiming dominion and territory over the dog.
Yeah, beat you with my child's piss, my spawn's piss. There's probably some black magic going on. Mm-hmm. At this point, we see that like it's 2 days of not answering the phone.
Which is also long enough for Dad to bail on the ad campaign, tell his dude, I care more about my family than I care about this.
I'm gonna
so now
home.
You have a reverse ticking clock where you're like, oh, he's got to get there fast. I hope he gets there, right?
Is the man gonna arrive?
Yeah.
It's also another thing that's
we'll
happening in
it.
1983.
So then we add a double ticking clock. So there's 2 reverse ticking clocks. Maybe Tad could show up and the dog has to die eventually of rabies. The other ticking clocks, though, are thirst, dog attack, and now they never even say if it's allergies or asthma. I don't know exactly. Panic attacks. I'm going to guess something asthma related, given King's history of using that as a trope in his stuff. But the point is, Tad chokes sometimes.
He has a seizure from heat stroke.
Okay.
That just happens, I think, to the body.
So he starts choking more and more, and you got to sort of give him, breathe into him a bit and get him going. But the point is, like, we don't know how long Tad can survive the combination of heat and no water and whatever's going on with his lungs. Dad gets home. He sees that, we see Steve, who I call Roger all through my notes for some reason, comes by to what? Try to rape her again? Like, why is he there?
Yeah,
but when she's not there, and I guess there's there could be a symbolic rabies thing here, but it's not explored. He just goes mad and he just rips up the whole house. So that when the dad gets home,
very unhinged,
he naturally assumes, it's like Janine Garofalo in Wet Hot American Summer.
Every room.
Yeah, every room is. I would have loved to see it happen.
This man is a rabid dog.
He is. He needs to be put down like a rabid dog. So they naturally assume that he must have kidnapped the missing mom and child. The cops are pretty lackadaisical about it. They're like, we kind of buy that story, but we're not sure. We'll put out an APB, but we're also suspicious of you. Not helpful, as they tend to be, especially in horror movies, because it helps add to the tension. But they pick up Kemp, which is his last name, and they tell him he cleared questioning, and they really think he's innocent because he completely admitted to trashing the house and all this shit, and he is going to face consequences. But he said that he didn't see them, and that's why he flipped out, and they believe him. And we cut away to the other place where they have sent a guy to check on Joe Camber house because
the sheriff,
it was a lead, and the local sheriff or whatever, and he gets et by Cujo in the barn, who sneaks up on him.
Gets et,
and then he...
Well, the only important part is that he loses his gun.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's multiple times when Cujo tackles you, you instantly butter drop your gun. Like that has to happen, right?
Right. Everyone has a gun. Loses it to Cujo.
Now I'm fucked. Yeah. So now they know, and you, the audience, are happy because they're headed over there because they know that that guy's been gone a while. Meanwhile, Mom's got to solve, Donna's got to solve shit herself because Tad is in the morning completely unresponsive. So Donna opens the door and risks it all to go fight Cujo, grabbing the bat from the mud, which she's been contemplating this whole time. So Cujo was bitten by a bat, and now he's going to be killed by a bat, which I did like. That sort of synergy. There's some POV shots where we are Cujo taking bat hits to the dome that go pretty hard.
Yeah, they go really hard, dude.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if we've ever shot this kind of violence toward a dog.
Toward an animal from the dog's point of view.
In cinema. Well, that's not true. There's some pretty awful scenes in Chernobyl, but like,
yeah, that's true.
Just like visceral, like, oh shit, someone's actually just like there's sped up footage of patting a little doggy in the face with like, I don't know, cardboard probably.
And we wrap it with what I would say is a pretty classic, well-worn maneuver at this point. This whole 3-beat sequence, which is, oh no, the bat snapped against his head. That just goes to show how strong and unstoppable Cujo is. You're definitely fucked. Cujo leaps on you. Oh, he must be ripping your throat out. Wait, he's still. Oh, you roll over to reveal the snapped bat went through his neck by chance. That sure is lucky, and or you were resourceful at the last second. Good for you.
Right, good for you.
So it's good. It's all good. And the man
Cujo's
gets there.
Down.
And I like that the film waits. It goes, wait. What does the dad think about this? So like, the dad's got to get there. It's not over yet.
The dad needs to be
here. So dad
right?
gets there. And the second he enters frame and takes possession of his child, it freeze frames and plays music that I would argue really ruins the tone, and then credits roll.
Yeah, I would argue that it's the sweetest, most whimsical music ever.
The music makes it feel way cornier than the film has actually been. It's not that
like we're in
cheesy.
the fucking Shire.
Yeah, or like reading a romance novel. Yeah.
Yeah. The only thing that you missed is that like that's not how Cujo goes out. Cujo does go out from a.
That's how I interpreted the sequence of images I saw.
Cujo goes out with she grabs the sheriff's gun, revives the boy. He's alive now in the kitchen. Cujo breaks through the window. Cujo gets shot. That's it.
Okay. She does stab him with the thing, though.
She does.
But then there's another.
That's the thing.
Then he lives again.
It's a classic.
Because she does the additional classic thing where this thing that she's hated for so long that she would absolutely shoot it to make sure it's dead. She decides not to waste a bullet on it. Like she goes, I assume you are dead. That's right.
Yeah. Like I don't need to be.
I don't need to be
a monster.
Dog.
I mean, I think we've all had that moment.
Horse dog.
We're staring there, bloody, gun in our hand, almost dead dog, and we're like, "Do we shoot this dog?" I think we've all had that.
I think it's dead. I think so.
Yeah. The fights in this movie are pretty brutal. Like the dog wins every time, except for the last time.
The hardest thing is justifying that against like a grown man with a gun.
Right.
And they don't do a terrible job. I also wrote that I think the actual fight sequences, like the shark attacks, why you come to the movie, right? Uncut Gems vibes, really good sound design layering to do tension. Yeah, super good tension in the attacks. I think the attacks are highly effective. If you can let go of the idea that, I'm probably not right. Like a St. Bernard probably could really fuck me up. But I've seen velociraptors and shit now, so it's hard for me to, you know what I mean? Like if you can get into it and be scared of a Saint Bernard that's attacking you, then yeah, the attacks are really good.
Cinema's poison. You've watched too much movies, and you're like, this is mid now. I don't care.
Well, I question how long I don't know, but how long a rabid animal keeps its strength. Like I would think Cujo would also be suffering organ failure and shit. I don't think you like stay dog strong while you die of rabies over days. I think it degrades your faculties.
I'm sure somebody out there knows how rabies affects a dog.
Please let us know.
Not in Cujo. They're going to take liberties baby.
Mhm.
And I'm going to take this liberty to move us to the next section. Yeah? Yeah?
It's not a liberty if you ask.
That's true. Skeleton Crew!
Be free!
Something in the mist! Shut the doors! Shut the doors!
Here's where we're going to talk about the creative team and any interesting behind the scenes trivia that like come up.
Yeah, I got a bit actually.
Yeah, hit me.
I'll just notable. We mentioned Dee Wallace, who Stephen King said he prefers this or whatever favorite female lead in one of his things. He said at some point, including Misery, which is saying something. So, and I do think Dee Wallace did good. I don't know. Stephen King just spoke highly of it. Also, Daniel Hugh Kelly and Danny Pintaro. I don't know anything about those people, who they are, but they're in this. And then the screenplay was written by King in collaboration with two others, Don Carlos Dunaway, Barbara Turner, and it was directed by Louis Teague. Now, all these people did not ring huge bells for me. The only thing that did is the director of photography, Jan de Bont. Ding, 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 baby.
Ding,
We're talking
ding.
Speed, Twister, Minority Report. That guy.
Yeah. Also the DP at this time, and he went on to make Die Hard, I believe. Die Hard? Yeah, I think Jan de Bont.
If I could take a liberty with facts.
Take a liberty with Die Hard. The only thing I'll mention that Louis Teague has signed up for the King crew because he also did Cat's Eye. He also made this out of control. His I think debut was Alligator, which if anyone ever watches, it's an insane movie.
And it is what got him this.
But it is a very creature featurey. This is the era. This is the beginning. So this is for King. This is I'm coming in with all the weirdos.
This is the era. That's one of the factoids I wanted to mention is the quicksand or having your identity stolen or whatever. Something viral must have happened, or there was a real dog attack, or just a bunch of people saw Jaws and were like, a cheap version of that is a dog. But regardless, this era was rife with movies like this. Yeah. So this movie was just part of a movement, including 1976's Dogs, which is about a dog attack, Dracula's Dog in 78, The Pack in 77, Mongrel in 82, White Dog in 82, and Cujo in 83, and then Rottweiler Dogs of Hell in 83. So we were all about dogs gonna get you. 3D. Yeah.
Yeah. In about 8 years, there were 7 demon dog movies, which is ridiculous.
Dog, bro.
Also came out the same year as Christine. So it's
the
dogs, cars, and it's the same basic formula. But yeah, this movie I think does kind of stand above in a way. I don't know, we'll get into a little our opinions later, but the Jan de Bont thing, I was vibing with this movie. I had not seen it before a few days ago, and it holy shit, this movie does kind of rip in terms of just scene to scene, how terrifying they actually make a dog. Another thing that I mentioned, kind of weirdos, and just while we're talking about who was in the movie, the Dee Wallace and the Christopher Stone angle, right? They were, so that's Steve, that's The Affair, right? That's Donna and Steve. They were both, I think they met or maybe before on The Howling. They were a duo for some time in the 80s, and they were also married during this movie. So it's just strange that the more I study old horror movies, it's a bunch of weirdos having just the time of their lives. Carpenter as well. If you look at all of his crews and his casts, especially through the 80s, it's just small batches of tightly knit weirdos, right? By the way, Carpenter also passed on this movie.
Patreon.com/smallbeans. A small cadre of tightly knit weirdos.
Yeah, exactly. Carpenter didn't think this movie was particularly good. When he read the script, he was just nah. Which,
Carpenter.
That's fair. But he went with the car one. He was but yes to the car.
But I will do the Christine.
No to the dog. I love some aspects of
maybe
the
didn't want to
trivia
work with an animal.
Yeah.
That is a real thing.
That's a real thing.
People have preferences about that.
And in that vein, the dogs featured in this film would often have their tails tied down to their legs because the dogs would enjoy themselves so much that they would wag their tails during filming.
In the very first attack, they missed it, and when he kills
It's
the
just a
drunk guy,
happy
he
little
is
boy,
very
yeah.
happily like playing with him, which is kind of silly. And I bet they kicked them. I bet they're like, that fucking sucks. That's our first shot of the attack. But that's what we have.
Sucks.
Yeah.
We suck right now.
And yeah, speaking of considering that the animal actors are valued members of the cast, I think it's of course always sad that like the Saint Bernard did die. Like the one that you see the most died of bloat, which is, you know, twisted stomach, which has to be related to doing all this strenuous shit and stunts and
Probably.
shit.
The equivalent of a
But that sucks.
stress.
I hate that.
I hate
very
that.
sad. And since it's a horror movie, I let that flow into my brain, you know? Like
Yeah,
I was like, this
adds
dog
to
is really
terror.
dying. Yeah, it
Yeah.
adds fucked up feeling if you grant it into your.
But that was like after the movie, though, right? That wasn't.
Well,
like,
I
during the
I
movie.
do my research before I watch the movie usually, so I
Mhm.
had it in mind. And then I don't know if this led to the bloat. You know, it's interesting
Yeah,
that he
yeah,
got
yeah.
twisted
No, it's
stomach. That's also what Santa's little helper gets. And then I was also just speaking the dog's point of view, the scene that wrecks me the most, like I actually
Uh-huh.
did cry, was the scene that we mentioned with the Joe Camber boy Brett, and we didn't mention how it's fucking foggy as shit.
Yeah.
And he says, like Bart does to Santa's little helper, "Come on, boy, it's me. You remember me." And you see the dog. I mean, it's editing tricks, but the dog remembers that it's barely can tell, oh, it's my master. And, you know, brings
Walks
all of its
away.
willpower
Yeah.
to bear and doesn't kill him. And
Right.
that's really got me.
That's
scene
yeah.
really
No, it's a
got me.
beautiful like
It's beautifully shot too.
Yeah, I in my madness, I still love you.
Yeah.
You were the one on the whole,
Very
all of
sad.
the earth that was mine.
Yeah.
You and me, baby.
But yeah, my last thing is that foam, it really gross. The makeup plan for how to show the rabies or
Mhm.
whatever, because we want to dress it up and make him zombie-like, is they
Mhm.
just made this concoction of basically meringue, egg whites, and sugar.
Yeah.
And smeared it
Nice.
all over them and threw like blood and shit on him. So he just looks like muddy, bloody cum goo all over his face and body.
Yeah, it's kind of like that's
And they
not
ate
how
it a lot,
rabies
I
looks,
guess, is
but
the
like
fact
you
of it.
know, they were trying to do a demon kind of
Yeah.
like
Well,
it's a very special case
Without
of infection.
CG, imagine how hard it would be to continuously keep foam in a dog's mouth. That's just such a pain.
You're not.
Yeah.
That's not happening.
Yeah. All right. That's all I got.
Yeah, that's I think enough.
That's
That's
rough.
enough of that. Let's move to the next segment where we talk about like some more themic stuff, maybe some symbols,
We'll see.
some scene work.
If you're good.
We call it it.
Bill, if you'll come with me, you'll float too. You'll float too. You'll float too.
Well, speaking of good stuff and the on debant of it all, there's a couple really notable shots to me. The one that's the
Yes.
loudest, of course, is the Dutch, that 70s show shot where the camera swings
Mhm.
around and around and around, and you want the impression of my whole life is this fucking car, and my kid is over there continuously screaming. Just the horrible feeling of that. And
Yeah.
every time you get to Dee Wallace, she's more upset. Every time you get to him, he's just continuing to cry.
Just
And
spinning.
It's very, very effective. And I think especially effective because of the very particular, probably a difficult cam op like maneuver. There's like a swing beat. Like it swings faster through the empty space and slows down as it hits the actor and faster through the empty space.
It's
and
got a
slow-
servo.
It's
yeah.
a really good ass. op.
It's really good.
Yeah.
It's really, really good. And I don't want to overstate it because I'm so like hot for Jan de Bont.
Mhm.
This is genius. Do you want to know how they did it? They took a
Mm-mm.
periscope lens they made a pole like rig and stuck it on the top of the roof of the car. They cut a hole in the roof. So
Mm.
it's like a periscope that submarines use, right? And then while they're standing on the roof of like
They're
the
just
station
turning
wagon,
it.
they're cranking it. They're
Yeah.
just cranking it. So the shot's great because it makes you feel dizzy and surrounded, just like the boy and Dee Wallace. But like the insane amount of like they had to dial in like the beautiful movement of left to right, right to left, like the idea of like we pan over to her to the boy, to her to the boy, at different speeds. And then let's finish the shot by spinning so fast that you are literally propelling. You're just like on a propropeller.
Yeah,
you know,
whip out. Yeah.
And
whip
the
around.
ability to make a rig
like a twister.
Like just on, like off the cuff, like, yeah, let's, I don't know, take a week and figure it out.
Do it this way. Yeah.
And make it look that good is insane. The craftsmanship on that, because that's a super unique thing needed for only one shot. Why would you do
Yeah. And there's
then
a
people
few
were like, yeah,
moments like that throughout. Like, this has been done before, but it's done very effectively here, where the second the kid flicks the light switch off in his bedroom, his bed seems way further away and his closet door seems way bigger than it did. Really like seamless. You don't even know, you notice that's happening, but it doesn't even occur for you to you for a second how much fucking work that, like, they had to do a build or force perspective or shit to do that. Yeah.
And it's
just for that tiny moment. Yeah.
This movie is full of little moments like that. There's a jib shot from like the top of the house overlooking the car after the initial attack that goes all the way to the ground, lands behind Cujo, then rotates and swings around to his face. And he's just sitting there watching the car and he's happy and it's fantastic. But it's just like that is not only a smart shot because it sets up the geography and kind of gives you this haunting calm of like this, everything is now motionless, kind of like you mentioned Jaws, like the ocean returns to its ebb and flow. You're like, there's no more violence. But it's also like, that is an insanely difficult technical shot to pull off. You're taking a wide angle lens, taking it from like, I don't know, maybe 40, 50 feet up. And then dropping it down while you're moving over to a dog, continue moving, and then rotate around the dog, which is a tight little move. So like, imagine the jib that you're on. And it's just like,
and the animal trainer's making sure the dog doesn't get spooked by the movement. Like, so many people who worked so hard, right?
And it turns into a close up, and he's covered with like applesauce or the meringue, you know, whatever.
I swear to God, dude, they get all the grips over, and they do just the circle jerk on the dog, and then they're like, take up.
Jesus Christ. And also some of the handheld stuff is great. I think there's one shot in particular that is like the voyeur camera that we see when like Joe arrives at his home and he's gonna get attacked by Cujo. It's like the second kill, and it's just like it follows him, and it does feel like Die Hard. I don't know, that's just a note I wrote down. I was just like, you feel the voyeur camera that is Die Hard, which is this roving kind of handheld. And I love handheld is great. It's an art form entirely in itself. Jan de Bont is one of the best. He has this momentum, he has this speed, he also has just like, it's working in tandem with the director, but it's like, you know, just the shot choices change at a rapid pace, and you're like, yes, okay, that this thing is moving constantly, and I don't even feel like it's handheld. And it's like, now that would just be done with Steadicam, and it would look very polished and fine. But Jan de Bont, man, in this era, fucking in his prime. Anyway, that's enough camera stuff.
Well, the last visual that really stuck with me that I'll throw out on the episode is just the last kill. The sheriff, the way they handle his death, and I'll say the most effective beats for this movie for me were less like Jaws. Oh my God, it's biting him. Like not always a jump scare, but even the dread of death, but it's on an action level. I had shades of like Hereditary and Funny Games and shit. Like you don't have to go there. It's not trying to be super fucked up, but like I said, if you grant that the dog is alive and experiencing these events, that makes it extra sad. If you grant that the real dog died, that adds a meta dimension to it. But also, there's things there are a few choices that I think support that sort of darkness angle. And I think the most striking one is the way they shoot that cop's death is that he slowly dies in a like medium wide, really staticky, looking near camera, looking shocked. Like really surprised that that really a dog bit my tummy up, and that's how I'm dying.
It's like my stomach, my guts are in my hands, and it's like, fuck. Okay,
just did not expect the day to go this way, and it's great. Yeah,
that brutality, but they were like, And
similarly, just a primal thing that always gets me. Like, see, Bone Tomahawk for a good example, is when the person who's like scared or sad is pleading, or like Miller's Crossing is another good example. So the Tad at the beginning, when he's scared of monsters, I have a short story that starts with an inner monologue very similar, is just crying in the dark, lays awake all night. This is after his parents told him the monsters are gone. Going, please, 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 please. That's so sad to me. Like a little kid staying awake all night feeling that way. Very sad.
Yeah, I remember when you pitched to me, because you remember I did like that short for this is a deep cut for Those Aren't Muskets Heads and such, but like I made a short called Hole, and Swaim wrote it, and I just thought you won me over with a single pitch that was in the same vein of this very thing, which was just like, what if like, you know what is one of the most fucked up things I can think of? What's the saddest thing lie about? And it's just like, kid having to bury his father kind of idea.
Right. Yeah.
And I was just like, damn, that's a banger right there. You know, like you could do that short film. And so like, yeah, it's definitely, I love the little moments that this movie does too, because while like just the D. Wallace, when like Tad, Daniel, whatever his name is, the actor, but Tad is crying for daddy constantly. And then D. Wallace is like, all right, I'll get your daddy.
Yeah.
But
The movie
like,
twists the knife in good ways. Like he likes the dad more, you know, but the dad leaves and he's left with the mom. And the dad is the one that he believes can magically ward away monsters, not the mom. Now, all of this shit you could say is, all right, we like, why would he keep shitting on the mom? But if you consider it, I mean, if you give them the benefit of the doubt and go, well, because she's the hero, we're trying to shit on her and twist the knife because it's a horror, I think it's effective in that way. You really like, she's fucked, man. This sucks. It's like, it's almost the kind of horror where I could understand why some people wouldn't like this subgenre of horror. Misery horror, where the imagination, you're just like, it would be so awful to be in that.
It's just misery.
God, that's just awful.
That's just awful.
Like I always think of those, you know, there's those fly traps that are a bag that has a goo inside the bottom that smells like shit.
Just like,
so we had a really bad fly situation at a house, and we put that up, and it just sat on the balcony, and I would watch, and it's the closest thing I can imagine to what hell would be.
That would be hell.
There were so many flies, dead and alive, that they formed like a soil that was a mulch of just dead flies. And within it, there were flies like being born, fighting to live, going like, why the fuck am I in this bag? Dying, being eaten by other flies and dying and giving birth. Like it was just like the whole fly life cycle in this tiny shit bag. This movie made me recall that memory, and I think that's to its credit since it's a horror movie.
You're like the Carl Sagan of shitbags.
Yeah, it smells like shit.
It just smells like shit. And I did want to point out, because you mentioned they were like, why is this movie shitting on the mom all the time? At the time, I was reading that publicly she's talked about the scene. D. Wall's talking about like being angry at the kid and like being kind of resentful and stuff like that. And parents wrote to her, and she responded and talked about this in an interview. So, you know, take it for whatever it is, but just like saying like only parents understand, and you nailed it.
It's kind of like The Last of Us.
Yeah.
Where it seemed to skew that parents were like, I totally understand dooming the world for my child. And people who haven't had kid largely skewed, I get it, you love your kid, but you wouldn't doom the world for them. You know, parents are like, if you had one, you would, though, because it's just a feeling. As
a non-parent, I get both sides, but I do understand.
I see that both could be possible for different people, you know?
I can totally see as a very human element, the frustration in a moment, yet trying to protect them at the same time. I can see that being like...
But a human mind's totally capable of sacrificing their child for greater purpose. Look at Isaac and Abraham evils. Or whatever.
Yeah. I want to talk about how overall, to me, and I'm sure you agree, I hope you agree. This is my thought on you. I think this movie more or less is missing the mark. I don't think they're connecting. Like, they have two subplots simultaneous. It almost seems like a slam dunk that they're going to thematically connect the two. And I don't think they're connecting the adultery subplot and the dog attack ultimately. I think that if I can think of anything the dog represents, I don't know what I can't think of what the dog represents.
It's not. And I think we would be doing it a disservice to just make up conspiracy theories. It's just supposed to be, what if Jaws was a dog? And you can tell that that's all it is. And in a lot of cases, that is okay, but it's almost like cooking a dish. If you're only going to present 2 ingredients, they have to be absolutely perfect. And it's not absolutely perfect. So let's talk about what throws it off. And I'm saying one way, which we mentioned, they could have solved it is more ingredients. Like, with the modern sensibility, having seen stuff like Nope and whatever, we're like, or Parasite, we can say things like, we'll make the dog mean something and tie it all together as like an essayist.
Horror wasn't that. But
horror wasn't that at this time. Yeah. So you don't. Right. So it's totally obvious to me why they didn't do that. In fact, it probably that would have made a flop. It's not the kind of thing that we need to build intellectually towards that.
They were
being
just like,
popular.
get to but I'm like, it's also though, like if we're get to the dog attack, if that's the goal, then why'd you spend 45 minutes of this subplot about 2 random people I don't know?
And maybe it's loyalty to the book. And maybe you do need that to fluff it up because it really should just be a short story, a dog attacking a woman in a car. Like that could be a short story. My only argument is I do think if you're able to project yourself into the dog's mind, you're supposed to feel that dread of the rabies getting worse and worse continually. And I bet the book makes you feel that, but the movie can't. Really. I mean, it would have to spend a lot more effort than it does on making you sympathize with the dog. But yeah, instead, where it stumbles is it fills the time with a highly traditional, shallow feeling melodrama. Makes sense that Stephen King was just drunkenly getting some shit out. The human part, because it's a very clever, bankable hook and premise, and that's why he's Stephen King. But the human part is like, he writes commercials, she's fucking around on him, and spoiler, if people want to not know the ending of the book and film or how they differ, now would be the time. Skip ahead or stop and come back. But spoiler, the difference is in the book, Tad is killed. And in this, everyone lives. And what's dumb, and I do think problematic or stupid, really, in the cosmology of it all, of the book ending, and why King says he likes the movie ending. Even though it's formulaic that it's a happy ending, you're like, you can always argue that, right? If you're sick of happy endings, that's your prerogative. But if you just kill the kid, what are you trying to say? Adulteresses should have their children killed? And then what about the kid from the kid's point of view? You're writing a book that sympathizes with a dog having rabies, yet you would sacrifice the kid without considering the loss of the kid's life from its own point of view? Does that all you know what I mean? Like, it doesn't hold together, Jim. Like, it's not a good story if you parse it that way.
What I love is that, Stephen King is also like, I love that ending, Cujo. That's great. Totally works. Improvement on the book. Cut to 2006 or whatever. The Mist.
I know. The Mist. And he goes, well, I had him shoot the child, and it turns out he didn't even have to. And he's like, I like that too.
That's
good too.
I like that too. It's like
he's
he doesn't
chill
give a
like
fuck.
that. Yeah. And Kubrick called him and tried to be all mysterious about The Shining. And then he saw it. And he's like, hey, I like that too. I mean, he's Stanley Kubrick.
Fine.
It's good,
I didn't like how he talked to me. He's a dick.
He was rude, but it was a movie.
But it was a
I
good
love
movie.
movies. Have you seen me in Night Riders?
Yeah, it's almost like he's like, yeah, go and have your little fancy pictures. Go enjoy that, Stanley. Go.
I think he's actually tickled
Obviously.
to be to see movies made of stuff he wrote. Just like the way that it was magic for me to see stuff I wrote be acted by talented actors.
Totally.
I think that held true for him still does to this day, which is fun. He's kept that inner child alive, at least that part.
Yeah. I think we're just being facetious, but
but he tends to be super into the movie adaptations with rare exception.
Yeah, I do want to but sorry again, Stevie. I do think that there is something to be implicit in what he's writing. That in his probably drunken mind, assembling parts that are still very much Kingisms. I think there's something implicit in, there is a statement about irresponsible people. These people didn't take care of their dog. They could have recognized that he had rabies, but instead it rips apart a middle-class family, and that middle-class family isn't idyllic either. I don't need a movie like this to have symbolic tastiness to have merit.
Doesn't have
but
to.
it's,
Could solve it with other things. But also yeah, it's just not fresh or like good enough when it's not doing the Jan de Bont party. Like the music by, I want to at least credit him, Charles Bernstein. At first I wrote, this score is pretty damn good. I'm actually into this score notably.
Yeah.
Then after a while, I'm like, you pushed it too far and you're not letting up. You're scoring stuff too tightly, like it's a Looney Tunes cartoon. Like when I take steps, the notes are in tandem. Like Charles, now you're ruining it, dude. You went too hard. And there's just a lot of stuff like that just seems like, I don't know, standard of the era. Not bad, but now it just feels like any late 80s, early 90s.
You're
movie.
absolutely right. I think the problem was in format and the problem was at the time and just mimicking what everything was doing. But like, if you actually look at the notes and some of the like just tones that he's getting, especially early on, it's kind of like There Will Be Blood a little bit. I mean, it's not screechy and polyphonic as, you know, that
the score, you mean? Yeah.
Score, the Greenwood score is in There Will Be Blood, but like it's aiming for the same purpose, trying to accomplish something that is like, yes, this is a beautiful moment that is also eerie. Why? Because I put music on it that made you feel like it was eerie. That's all. And you know, that's kind of cool. There's some good craft going on there. There's a lot of just generic King-isms, like the ad exec dad. I wrote down like just the concept of the city versus the rural. Like he's a city kind of folk, you know, even though that's entirely not true. They live in a rural community. But it's just interesting to me that like even at the beginning of his career, King was reaching for that kind of Americana level. The concept of the friendly neighbor who's fucking your wife or, you know, you're getting fucked by. It's just this idea of a tightly knit community where there is a haphazard kind of relationships that are kind of being deconstructed right in front of us.
Picket fences, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. I guess also it's important to place stuff in time and put the onus on it that time had. So I should correct myself. Not late 80s, early 90s, early 80s, 83. So even
83,
earlier.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's proto in some ways.
We have the concept of the indestructible, like kind of family unit is on notice here.
Right.
Like, you know, in the
they find their way back to each other. I mean, that's how the movie ends. As soon as you're like, well, the family's back together. I guess that's good. Let's get out of here. Yeah.
And we have finally kind of like, you know, there's the father-son relationship and there's this also outsider kind of vibe. You got the town drunk kind of thing. The person, the Cambers kind of family is like the black sheep of the community. They live on the outskirts. So he's just got a lot of these things swirling, but he's not really like planning them and putting them in action like he does later in his career is all I wanted to mention. I think there's a lot of interesting scenes that feel like they're not Kings, but are just kind of like people running with kind of like what Jaws was doing. Just like, oh, that nuance of husband and wife, or that nuance of two people who are strangers talking to each other, having an organic moment that is unique and charming in a way that feels like just a very out of the 70s into the 80s kind of thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's neither here nor there.
He's always trying to write about Americana, and because it's the early 80s, he's updating his Americana to include yuppies, which is a new and prevalent kind of American, and it is core to the culture of that time.
And there's also several beats of prayer in this movie. Like, it's always interesting to me the kind of like before he worked that out of his stories, because you see as Stephen King kind of progresses, at least his stories become less about faith than they were initially, I think. But it was another way to establish the American tradition. I think that his Cardinal North is absolutely that Americana thing you're talking about, where it's just like, that's where he wants to go.
I'm an American. I talk about American culture.
And whatever it may be. So she's obviously going to pray to God to get her out of this situation, you know? So that happens a lot, but I don't think that he's saying anything necessarily about faith. And definitely the movie isn't. The movie is just kind of like, that's just what you do in that situation, you know?
Yeah.
In any case, that's it for me for King-isms.
King-isms. I don't have King-isms, but I just think it's very funny that they're trapped in a Pinto So if you're aware of that comedy trope, I obviously expected the ending to be that the car violently explodes, killing the dog. Like Jaws.
Like Jaws.
Yeah.
Ooh, they get
bizarre.
the dog. Dude, the dog fucking body slams like Goldberg.
Hell yeah.
Like does this flying spear at the side of the car, just runs and slams its skull into the car door.
That
That's
was
a
the
great
mechanical
shot.
dog. They just had
Yeah,
on
there's
a rig.
it's clearly not the real dog.
But
it
what they
look
did is
good.
they cut shots of the dog running at from the reverse angle, and the way they did that is they hid its favorite toys in the car.
Yeah, and said,
That's
"Okay,
so
go get
good.
it."
Go get it.
Yeah. And then last for me is just, as people who do read my sci-fi stories know, like I in real life have a big problem with like abandonment and loneliness is very dark and sad and triggering for me. And in horror, you're trying to be triggering. So super, technique was ultra effective on me to have Tad, as he's choking to death, say, I don't want to be alone. I just don't want to be alone.
It's
like,
unnecessarily
he
hard.
equates dying with being alone forever. And I will say that is, to me, the scariest version of the afterlife is eternity alone. I know it's supposed to be eternity with 4 other people or whatever, but I disagree, Sart. I think alone would be way worse. Anyway.
Yeah. No, I mean,
and I'm like, what a devastating line.
leave it to Tad. Yeah. And with that kind of reminiscent thinking of death, we move to our next section. Yes. And it's called The Stand.
Time to make your stand.
The Stand.
This is where we talk
Stand
about
and
where
deliver.
it exists on the King Pantheon in our eyes. These are opinions of the
Stand-theon.
podcasters.
Mm-hmm.
We made a list of all the things that we covered. You get it. Where do you want to start? Top or bottom, Mike?
Let's start at the bottom because of what I just said.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I'm realizing as I say that we won't necessarily agree on what half it even belongs in, because I do think this was a middle of the pack one. No pun intended.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so
We
let's start at the
will
bottom.
Find
though.
out.
Yeah.
In this.
The worst thing of all for me is Salem's Lot, 1979. Trey boring.
Trey boring.
Trey boring.
To me, and we're at 25 at this point, by the way.
Oh, sorry,
We've done
25. You're right. Right, you are.
Yep.
25.
At 25, I have Michael Jackson's Ghosts.
Ahee. I'm glad to hear
Ah.
you've stepped back from that bit with which you ended last episode, marring our stand list forever. My 24 is Michael Jackson's Ghosts.
My 24 is Maximum Overdrive, and it's just because Stephen King called me, and he was just like, podcasts are not a laughing matter, and so I apologize for my jape.
I see. Hey, Stevie, I put Maximum Overdrive at 23.
23 is The Mangler for me.
22, Green Mile.
Dreamcatcher, man.
21, Dreamcatcher.
Yeah, 21 to me is the Salem's Lot, which, this is to me, that rounds out the worst of the worst.
I agree, but with the difference of adding Green Mile in there. Number 20, Children of the Corn. Just boring.
Thinner. I didn't love it.
19, Desperation.
19, The Dark Tower, the recent
Pretty
one.
bad. We're still all bad. Number 18, The Mangler. I think bad, but very fun. That bumped it up several.
That's true. I maybe didn't give it as much credit for fun, but that's just where I was in my life. I said the same about Dead Zone, mainly because it's kind of boring.
Yeah. Number 17 for me is the It TV series. It's good on paper. It's just not fun to watch.
See, we always see, as I've always said, we see eye to eye on 17. 1990 is it for me.
17 will always be Ziploc. Number 16, Dead Zone.
16, Children of the Corn, for reasons I think you mentioned.
15, Thinner. Feels like mean in a way that's not that engaging.
Yeah. 15 for me is Pet Cemetery, the 2019.
Yeah.
Still in the
Recently
boring
covered.
category.
Pretty boring.
I think it's offensive.
14, Running Man.
14, Christine, which, a lot of the Carpenter heads
that
out
means
there.
dogs over car for you. And for me, number 13, Christine. So we both went dog over car.
Yeah.
Bad move, Carpenter. Should have done the dog movie.
Should have done the dog movie.
People like dogs more than cars.
Well, it's just how it was made.
What's-
13, I'm
yeah.
desperation. I
Mhm.
like a lot of it, but it just feels so middle of the road and so
Yeah.
many wasted scenes.
Speaking of middle of the road, Pet Cemetery. No, my 12 is Apt Pupil.
Yeah, I placed that slightly higher because I put 12 Creep Show.
Well, because you're super into Bryan Singer. You've always been a big Singer head and supporter.
You
Creep
goddamn
Show.
bastard.
I did number 11's Dark Tower for me.
11 is where I put The Green Mile.
I just love the Dark Tower concept. The movie's very rushed, as everyone says. Number
Yes.
10, Pet Cemetery 2019. That's way
Number-
too. I feel like that's got to be dropped.
Yeah.
As I say
Number
with
10, I put at Pupil just
Mhm.
because, I don't know. I don't have to defend myself.
No,
It's
you don't.
about where
Much like
Michael
Bryan
put it.
Singer. Now I don't. I wonder if we will touch tips because my number 9 is Cujo.
I'm putting Cujo above it because I'm putting 1408 at 9.
Wow. Okay. Well, Cujo's definitely better than Pet Cemetery 2019, which is a reason I know that's probably got to drop. Christine and Running Man seem too low now compared to Pet Cemetery to me. But anyway,
Mhm.
I put Cujo there, and I want to say it was a tough call. I did compare it head to head with Christine. It's clearly better than Pet Cemetery, more engaging. I think it goes right below Creep Show because Creep Show is like competently made, but also zany fun. And that gives it the edge over Cujo.
It's
to
like
me.
sketch,
Yeah.
horror sketch.
Yeah. 3
No,
extremes,
that's-
but not as extreme.
I mean, I love that format. It's a great
So
format.
my number 8 is Creep Show.
My number 8 is The Running Man, and I know we disagree on this. To me, that's the one that I'm like, kind of like your Creep Show. I'm like, this is just haphazard fun, an irresponsible film to make, but I enjoy the hell out of it. You know, there's a guy who sings opera.
Yeah,
and
the tone's just
electrocutes
so
you.
different than the story.
It's
the
so
original
out.
or
Yeah.
book.
But,
anyway,
I mean,
yeah.
it's just an Arnold vehicle, so it's beaueful. So
7,
I'm still,
one that I think you don't give enough credit. 1408 goes so hard, and it's Cusack.
Hey, I had it at, so you have it at 7. I have it at 9. 9 is my 1408.
All right.
But my 7 is Cujo. So like here we
Wow.
are,
Here we
kind of
are.
agreeing, right?
Swapping our
I give it,
dogs in our hotel.
the only reason I give it a slight bump is to me that the craftsmanship is on just a different
Cool.
level.
Cool, bro.
I love Jan de
Cujo.
Bont.
Yeah, he's great. All right, so now we'll just wrap
Finish
this
it out.
shit out. Number 6,
Yeah.
Carrie.
Carrie,
5, The Mist.
The Mist,
4, Misery.
Dr. Sleep,
3, Stand By Me.
Misery,
2, Dr. Sleep.
Stand By Me.
1, The Shining.
The Shining still
Yeah.
the winner. It's just, you know,
Winner and
I
still
don't-
champagne.
chicken dinner. That's it for this.
Cool. Next time we don't know yet because we haven't decided. I'm trying not to be as self-pluggy at the ends because we're doing that start plate thing now. But do you have any like sneaky clue
Yeah.
tips you want to dispense?
I do want to say for people who are enjoyers of the Small Beans Network that this comes out at the end of July 2023. That's the Cujo episode for everybody. If you are on the Patreon, you're going to get things to look forward to. Is we're going to have Daniel O'Brien on a frame rate at the end of the week on Men in Black.
DOB on MIB on SB.
Woo! And then we got more episodes of Star Trek The Next Futurama for you. We got more Shooting Threes to conclude their new trilogy. They're closing it out with Lady Vengeance. We got Director-Piece Theater by Adam Ganzer about Escape from New York coming. There's so
Oh.
much to look forward to.
Mhm.
And about half of the things that I just mentioned, you gotta do the Patreon in order to get to even listen to it. So enjoy the free feed, you freeloaders. No, we love you. That's
We
it.
love you.
That's all I wanted to mention.
Spooky.